We're now going to move to Dr. Sonja Macfarlane, who was an Associate Professor at the University of Canterbury but is currently working in Waikato for the Ministry of Education. She is Ngāi Tahu and Ngāti Waiwai, and as I've said, her current role is with the Ministry of Education in Hamilton. One of the reasons that we have Sonja here is because it was really important to make sure that we had a perspective from the people who were here first. And Sonja and I were having a brief discussion earlier, which was about we both grew up on the West Coast together and how far our lives have come since those days, me as Pākehā and her as Māori, in trying to live out the treaty, bring the world together. So again, on a personal note, it's a great honour to have you here, Sonja, and we know that what you have to say will be really thought-provoking. So hands together, please, for my wonderful colleague.
Ko tuhu e te maunga, ko ara ki te maunga ariki, ko taki tumu te waka, ko arahura te awa, ko Ngāi Tahu te iwi, Ngāti Waiwai te hapu, ko Sonja Herehini Macfarlane toku ingoa, no arahura au, ki te tai o Pautini, he pou hiki ahuria e te tāhuhu o te mātauranga taku mahi, e noho ana i nānei ki kirikiri roa, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. That's Māori for hi, I'm Sonja. I'd like to start by acknowledging everyone, but also to move on to my perspective. It's a Māori perspective, not the Māori perspective. But I'd like to pose some of these pātai or questions. What does global citizenship mean for Māori as tangata whenua of Aotearoa? Are tangata whenuatanga and global citizenship compatible notions? We are all citizens of the globe, but how do we be responsive global citizens? How are local and global roles and responsibilities delineated and defined? And what are some of the parameters that global citizenship education needs to take into account in order to be responsive to the rights and responsibilities of First Nations people globally? I consider that where we walk, what is our place? How are we connected to that place? And for Māori as tangata whenua, I think there is a sense as you go up that you can be both tangata whenua of Aotearoa and manuhiri, a visitor when travelling and working overseas, but you can also be tangata whenua and manuhiri within Aotearoa, New Zealand. Whenever we step outside of our own tribal location, I argue that we are manuhiri, we are visitors in that space. So I believe that we can adopt a distinctive position in terms of rationalising the tangata whenuatanga and the rights and obligations as global citizens, as these concepts are dually dependent on connectedness to place. So I see that it's a shared and universal responsibility, but it must come with caveats. Jacinda Ardern, as mentioned earlier, was very, very astute in her response to the March 15 event. I was in Christchurch at the time. My brother is a principal of a school and my son works there. And they were locked down for hours, and they had 2 families affected by loss. And it's very hard to explain how that makes you feel. But I see that Jacinda Ardern displayed many beautiful Māori qualities in the way she responded to this event. So she acted with, these are concepts that I put together in terms of how I define leadership from a Māori perspective. Someone who has authority or mana, and that's the strength to act with dignity and use mana-enhancing approaches. Using courage, the warrior there, to face challenges but to make a difference. She drew on knowledge, existing and new knowledge. She didn't force Western knowledge. She used, and her kete there, she had vision, the mountain. Moi moia, MOE, doesn't always mean Ministry of Education. The strength to see beyond the here and now. Unity or kotahitanga, she had the strength to engage and work collaboratively with people in collective responses. And she showed manakitanga or humanity, to express kindness and put others before self and nurture. And of course she was cognizant of stewardship or guardianship, and she worked with Ngāi Tahu, the notion of kaitiakitanga or protecting things, values, beliefs that people hold dear. So global citizenship education must illuminate Indigenous concepts that respect a collective, connected and collaborative approach to problem solving. This is the doing with, not to. I've got an example that I'd like to share on page 1 of my paper. So I think for Māori, we've always had kinship with place through whakapapa or genealogy and pepeha narratives which connect us to our tūranga waiwai, where we have a right of residence and a right to stand and a right to speak within our tribal boundary. And our creation stories outlined from our tūpuna metaphor and thought beyond Aotearoa and talked about the real world. They talked about the global world, and that we ventured in metaphor and thought beyond Aotearoa to Te Ao. In doing so, we acknowledge Papatūānuku, Earth Mother, and Ranginui, Sky Father. Our whakatauki, our proverbs, accentuate the importance of respecting te tangata or the people and to pay homage to the natural world, te tai ao. We have talk about our awa, our moana, our ngahere and our whenua. Te reo Māori language acknowledges kinship with nature by the use of the word whenua, which is the earth, but it's also a placenta, which is it's a source of nourishment for people. I think there's a lot of opportunities to derive solutions from Indigenous knowledges. Because we live in a world where there are competing values. We have individualistic, the I, me, independence, self-advancement, personal autonomy, all of them founded on colonialism and individuality and consumerism and capitalism. Where we move to the right-hand side, where I think the left-hand side in a way may have caused a lot of our issues. I think the responses can be in the right-hand side, where we use the us, we, interdependence, group, collective. We construct the solution and we all contribute and we all have strength. I see democracy, when you're a minority, can sometimes fly in the face of collectivity, but I'll leave that. And I also believe that if we want to understand what is happening now, we need to journey to the past. Haere whakamua. The events of today are shaped by the events of yesterday. So I argue that global education must be premised on acknowledging the unique status of Indigenous First Nations people, wherever they are locally and globally. We must acknowledge the impact of a dominant discourse over time and how these have perpetuated many current injustices and intolerances, human rights violations, unsustainable environments that currently exist. We must recognise it as not as a here and now as the starting point. We must look to the past, draw on place-based knowledges and highlight the importance of constructing responses, solutions in partnership. And we must understand the impact and the importance of place and jurisdiction, unpacking the local versus the global. I see that it is important that we don't move into other people's jurisdictions and start thinking that we can move the furniture around. I've created a little framework. You're not an academic unless you have a framework. But I call this the Māori Ora framework, and I premise it on Māori constructs or worldview values of manakitanga, whanaungatanga, rangatiratanga and kotahitanga, and all of them have a way of making us behave, understanding that hosting rights and obligations are extended by Indigenous guardians, and working in ways that build and maintain mutual care and respect. That's manakitanga. Whanaungatanga, acknowledge the need to build strong partnerships, work in ways that promote respectful relationships. Rangatiratanga, the notion that self-determination has got to be a pivotal thing. Respect the stewardship authority rights of Indigenous guardians and work in ways that uphold local leadership, authority and status. And finally, kotahitanga, respect the need to work collaboratively and reach consensus. Work in ways that encourage cooperation and unity. And in the middle, if all goes well, we should have Māori Ora, or a sustainable, safe and healthy society that nourishes all citizens. I think that issues at the moment, that is a very reflective of the 3 treaty principles. I love our Treaty of Waitangi principles of protection, partnership and participation. A good global citizenship, if you're a Kiwi, should uphold those anywhere you are in the world. And I think our ihu mātau kaupapa at the moment is reflective of many of the notions I have shared today. Nō reira, raurangatira mā, e hoa mā, tēnā koutou, kia ora rā, tātou katoa.